I'm very glad to announce our second panel. It's called Get to Work, How Can We Change Reality? And it's great to have you all here. At first I want to introduce our panelists. We have Frieder Blume. He's a composer and music producer. He does a lot of theater productions, and right now he does the sound design for work at the Gorki Theater by Olivia Wenzel. He worked as a music producer and as a DJ, and he has his own record label. He studied musicology and gender studies at the Humboldt University in Berlin. And as I mentioned, he's a sound designer, also often works in collaboration with Joana Tischkau. Joana Tischkau is a freelance choreographer and performer. She works with post-colonial theories, feminist discourses, and pop cultural phenomena. And together with Frieder Blume and Elisabeth Hampe and Anta Helena Recke, she founded the German Museum for Black Entertainment and Black Music. And we are going to talk about that later. Glad that you're here.
I will say it in German once, because actually there's only a German title.
It's only a German title.
Deutsche Museum für Schwarze Unterhaltung und Black Music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. And we have Jean-Paul Bourelly. He grew up in Chicago and moved to New York at the age of 18. In his early years, he worked together with figures like Muhal Richard Abrams, Elvin Jones, or Pharoah Sanders. He connected with Haitian musicians and discovered and formed an Afro-futuristic sound, and also searched for a Black Atlantic sound together with the historian Paul Geroy, from whom we heard before. He formed the Boom Bop with Archie Shepp in 1995, and his later projects are the band Stone Riders, for example, with Daryl Jones, or Citizen X, with featuring the poet Sadiq Bey. And last but not least, we have Kornelia Vossebein. She is right now the project manager of Nika Artist Development at the Stadtgarten in Cologne. And before that, she was the managing director at the Bunker Ulmenwall in Bielefeld from 2001 to 2009. This is a social, cultural, education and music venue. And after that, she went to Zeche Karl in Essen and worked also for festivals like the Monheim Triennale or the Mörs Festival. Glad that you're here, Cornelia, as well. And as our panel is called Let's Change Reality, Get to Work, at first I wanted to define it with you together. So what would you say, what is the reality, Cornelia?
Oh, me?
Yeah. For example.
The reality.
Everybody gets to say something.
First of all, thanks for the invitation, and please, you others help me to define the reality, because I'm not
do it together.
definitely not able to do it alone. I think the reality still is that we have some social groups, ethnic groups, cultural groups which are underrepresented on stage, and which is, I think, isn't more important, underrepresented behind the stage or in positions with power, where you have where you can really change, because you have the right to decide whom to invite, or which artist should get the grant or not, and so on. So that's the reality, but things are changing, for God's sake. So I try to just keep it brief. We have, I think, more progress in the question of gender balance right now, because it started earlier. It started in the 60s and 70s. And we also have a change for more diversity, for people with different cultural backgrounds, colors, and so on. But this is not so further developed. So at the moment, this is the thing we have to discuss. We have to, well, find solutions together.
Yeah.
Definitely together.
Yeah. Would anyone of you would like to add something to that?
Well, I would say that basically we have watched the structures that when I first came to Europe in the 80s, we watched all of them just go away. The subvention, all those things that that were there to support art, and we as a music community have just watched it. Like, when is it coming? You know, and it's not. So it's like I think this is a great opportunity to activate at least ideas, because we have to be more proactive. It's just how it is. You just have to be more proactive. I heard the last guest speak about how things are happening in America, but you know, people, I mean, they were rioting in the streets. Things are going to change when they think, okay, this is going to get burned down, and that's going to, you know. I'm not saying that, I'm not co-signing that at all, but I'm just saying you can't talk about what we need to do without talking about society and in general. And so these things have happened, and there's nothing to replace it. So we have to talk about ideas of cooperation, ideas about code of conduct, which is very important, you know, because musicians are so goddamn special, you know, we can't do anything together. That's a problem. That's a problem. That's a big problem, you know. You have to be an individual when you're creating, but then when you're looking at the business, because we all live in capitalism, or this kind of quasi, you know, capitalism, and you have to put a different chip in your brain and say, I'm going to work as a team. I'm going to work. I'm just, you know. And so these are the kind of things we need to talk about.
Yeah. So, Mary, what would be your ideas when we think about collaborative work? How can we establish that more?
Well, you do have people collaborating. I see a lot of collaborations, but I see a lot of structures that are not attacking the root cause of gaining access to some of these, you know, some funds. You know, I can just say I had, you know, one of my favorite guys I drink coffee with at Pragerplatz. You know, he's the old guy, you know, clarinet player, and he used to, and I was complaining one day, oh man, you know, the music business. And he said, man, the problem with you guys is you have no representation. He said, if everybody could put their money together and buy one of these politicians, you guys would, you know, have some representation. I laughed, but then I was like, oh, damn, you know, it's kind of, you know, that would move a needle, that would do something. So these are the kind of things we should be thinking about, you know. How, can you put money together? Who do you trust with that money? Who can, you know what I mean? That's how this society works, you know? So you have to respect how the society works. And musicians tend to live in this alter reality. And so I think it's really a revolution of the mind and the soul to separate the two. How do you function? And that's what I said about a code of conduct. That thing needs to be clarified now, because they're not going to help us. I mean, beyond. Yeah. Yeah. And if they do help us, it's going to get taken away as soon as they think, okay, it's enough now, you know? So you want something sustainable. That's very important, sustainability.
Yeah, yeah. I was just keeping in mind something you said before. Do you think that we maybe also need a kind of lobby for that?
Yes. I mean, I just said you need somebody better be talking to you. I've seen Germany, when I first came here in the 80s, the early 80s, and then I lived here in the early 90s. In Berlin, there was a lot going on, but it was political ideas. It was political decisions that were made beyond musicians. You know, like we had Multiculti SFB. You could find a radio station for every genre of music. So of course there was a lot. It was live. But the day they took that away, it was from one day to the next. It was so easy. It was just there, and then it was gone. And so to create something more sustainable, yeah, you need lobbying. You need organizing people. You know, organizing money. You know, having, I don't want to say unions, but hey, you know, why not? Is there, I don't know any, nobody ever approached me about a musicians union in Berlin. I never heard about that. You know?
Yeah, but that's the problem, I think.
Yeah, yeah, you need representation. Yeah. So we could talk about, you know, I don't like to cry to power. Please give me some, no, fuck that, sorry. because we have power that we're not using.
Yeah. Yeah, talking about union, Joana and Frieder, I thought that you founded your museum together, right? In a union collaborative kind of work. Maybe you can explain a little bit what is that museum and also how do you work together?
Yeah, I think maybe first I would go to the first question that you asked, which is like how that we should describe reality, and then I was really again thinking the only thing that we can describe or I can describe is my reality.
Yeah.
I think that's really important, and I think that also was like kind of already maybe touched upon the two presentations before, you know, and then actually it was super interesting to observe that at the end, when confronted with the question, but how now do we proceed or how do we start changing reality, was a bit like, but that, oh, this I cannot do, it's not my job to do this, and shortcuts are not possible. And I think it's really maybe good, interesting now we can talk about that, that's something that we try to do. We tried actually to be a shortcut by saying now we founded the Deutsche Museum für Schwarze Unterhaltung und Black Music, and we're an institution that displays artists of color, black artists that have lived and worked in Germany. It's not so important that you had a German passport, but what we kind of said is that you must have had worked in Germany during, I don't know, early
50s until 2005.
Yeah, 50s until 2005. So this is, and the only other definition is that you had to be black, but that's also debatable. For example, like if I put the name Sabrina Settler out there, we can talk about it. Or Xavier Naidoo as well, which of course is problematic for other reasons. And you must have had lived in Germany, worked here, and that's it, no? Like, and of course it's very random because, like I said, we are not as precise as the Jazz Institute probably is, and it's like, is this jazz or is it, I mean, anyway, what is black music? That's also why we use the term. But really, then to say there is a space that honors and kind of puts a highlight or spotlight onto the works of these artists, regardless of whether we agree with their political view, with their aesthetic, like we have Boney M in there, we have Billy Moe, we have Roberto Blanco, we have a lot of people. No Angels. Brosis, you know, like regardless of whether we like, again, their ideology, their music, we put them in there. And we also, first of all, what was important for us was the representation. And yeah, again, like, and of course, we can debate how sustainable our project also is, but still, I would believe that it's possible to be really, really radical in your thinking and what you now put out in the world, you know? And maybe I go back to the example, like, who says it's not possible to create like a curriculum, even as a white professor or teacher, that is solely black German artist, you know? Who says that it's not possible? And yeah, maybe you need to reconfigure, like, aesthetically your, and maybe even, like I said, ideologically, like your maybe those thoughts don't comply anymore with your own thinking, but it's not about that at this moment in time, I would say. You know, that was a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
And also to say, I mean, to adjust your way of thinking about what is the quality I want to teach, for example, is also something that you learned, and to realize that you just have to relearn in a way or readjust. And I mean, we heard already about it that there's a big backlash during the last years, and to push against that and to realize how random these ways of defining what is teachable and not teachable, and representable and not representable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, this also reminds me of the principle from Max Tollek, which was mentioned before, a radical pluralism or radical diversity. It doesn't matter whether I agree with this musician or the ideology of that person. but it matters that I create a space, I create a stage where those people can be seen. And I think also this discussion about diversity is not so much about whether there are people, but whether those people are seen. And I think the problem is that very often they're not seen, but of course they're there. As you mentioned, now with this museum, maybe this is also kind of an opportunity for other people to see those people and to recognize, oh, okay, we have so many actually.
And maybe that's, sorry, I come back to it, but why I said I can only look at my reality, and that was really the starting point for us, that we started with 2 other collaborators, another black artist and another white artist, that for me as a black German choreographer, dancer working, there was nothing that I could look towards as like my genealogy or history or canon, so to say. So if the only canon I can orientate myself on is like an US American canon, what does that mean for my work? Very importantly, and what then if I construct this canon myself, you know? And therefore, to do that, like I said, we couldn't like take these markers such as quality or, you know, ideology, aesthetic vision or whatever, because then there would have been nothing left, you know? So I think, I mean, this was the starting point for us to say like, hey, let's just collect everybody who was there, and then we can see whether we can formulate an artistic future for ourselves from that, you know? Yeah.
I think that's extremely important because I noticed that the younger generation, sometimes I'll go to a panel discussion like this, and they'll talk about things, and I'm like, in a way where they think that's the first time it's happening. And I'm like, no, you don't know this guy and this guy and this guy, and they don't. So this is very great. Also, you know, it's very great because if you are only going to take references from what the power structure has already said is legitimate, then you are losing the battle for your own freedom. So you have to define it in a way where you can, you know, you can create the most, you know, complex view of what it is you're trying to say. And if you really look in Germany, you will find incredible amounts of people who've lived here, who've worked here. You know, me myself, I've worked here for almost 32 years, and they still call me Americana Jean-Paul Bourelly. I'm like, yeah, I'm American, but I gave a lot to you guys. Come on, give me something, you know.
And it's also, I mean, you can come into the museum. I would like, give us some of your stuff, for sure. Yeah. But I would also be interested, like, this is exactly the question. When do you start? When does your work become German? You know, at which point in your 30-year career does it Germanify? I don't know. You know.
Exactly, because the people who are creating these structures always see you as an Auslander, so you don't ever get that embrace. I mean, I've done, you know, Pentathlon at the, you know, with the, you know, in Berlin. I've done a lot at Bauhaus and Naunen, and you know, German work, you know, and yeah, you just think like, okay, you're gonna write me out again? Okay, that's fine, you know.
Yeah. But I think that those structures define you always as an Auslander, as you said it. Yes. Nevertheless, you're here for so many years. Is because those structures are not diverse, yes. And this is the problem, as we mentioned before. So maybe my question now would be, how can we change those structures? What can we do? What are opportunities? What are ways?
Yes, I'll just say this because it's just on my mind. I'm sorry I don't want to, you know, dominate this, but I just want to say that one of the hardest things to do in art, and I know everybody who creates something here can understand this, is to think of something and then to give it validation. You know, that's some people have it naturally, but most people don't. So it's, you know, my scale at which I start to do that is like, if I feel it strongly, then it's valid, you know? Because if I feel it, you know, then there's a million other people who probably feel that thing too. I haven't connected with them yet, but I'm gonna do it, you know? But it's a very hard process. So we have to start thinking about validating our feelings and then bringing that into reality, which you've done, which I think is great, you know? I'm happy to know about your thing. And you've got a lot of room to go, because you like the first, so bravo.
And it's a big question, I think, with several crucial steps or developments. One very important thing, to do research and to present things, works, artists which are not in the common consciousness. Can I say that? So the sensibility that there is more than the canon, the white, more or less male canon. That is crucial. That is important. And then I think you need how to change the structure. Just one point for me is definitely we need to work to represent on stages in our programs as a venue or as a festival. We need more or less a team of curators, different programmers with different cultural backgrounds, with different competencies, and so on. So yes, of course, there should be one person or one gremium to decide, but you need a broader horizon, you need more eyes, more ears, more opinions. And that is the great chance, I think, discussing these topics, these important topics.
Yeah, but I think when you, as you mentioned, the team, we have the question about staff, right?
As well, yeah.
Yeah. So if I have a team of 6 people maybe, and I already have this team, but unfortunately this team is all white, for example, and most of them are men, then what do? Should I fire somebody? Should I create a new position? Which money do I use? How do I talk to these people? Yeah.
2 days ago, I've read an article about the English touring opera, which is a free orchestra ensemble, and their aim is to present classical music in British cities which don't have an opera house. So, and they work with freelance musicians, and they. Most of them get annual contracts, so there's each year there's a competition, or then they decide whom to engage for the next season, and they didn't re-engage 14 of their long-term members of the ensemble because of diversity reasons. So the 14 they didn't engage again, hired again, were all male, white people between 40 and 66. And there's now a discussion in the UK about this decision. Was it right or not, or how to judge it, how to deal with it. But I've read it and I thought, whoa, that's great for this panel here today. Because that's the question. What do you do when there is just one person on the top of a company or an ensemble or a team? Or if you have an existing jury of 6 persons, what do you do?
Yeah.
One very popular step is just to take a 7th chair, so to say, okay, we have 6 white people, well, we can't. Well, they are already there. Let's look for a seventh person, and then preferably female and of color and disabled. Just, I'm kidding, but you understand the thinking.
I wrote something in Jazz Times last year, and I don't know what the question was about. Same thing, diversity and everything. And at the same time, I was walking down Bundesallee, and there was a stream of people from Syria, trying to get processed and all this stuff. And I could tell that the culture, it was getting very tight. I mean, the things that people, used to feel were getting, so it doesn't surprise me at all. This Resh Radical is growing and all this. It just was like that. But what I wanted to say was that what I wrote, it just came to my mind, and I said, if you want to embrace jazz, if you want to make jazz something embraceable, jazz, and when I mean jazz, I mean the ultimate possibility of all things. I don't mean Charlie Parker or Thelonious Monk or as great as they are, I mean the ultimate possibility of all things. So if you want to do that, why is it so uninviting for the immigrant? Why is it so uninviting for the refugee? I mean, who thinks out the box better than the refugee? You know what I'm saying? What kind of minds would you be bringing into the discussion? What kind of perspectives would you? I mean, we're talking about it as a dream, but there's something positive to be had if you sit with that idea, I think.
And I think it's illusional to think that we can really proactively change something without some elderly white men having to lose their jobs and power. It's illusion. It's not going to happen, So I really think that, of course, people need to come to terms with the fact that they're going to lose their jobs and they're going to have to make way. And it's not a matter of like what's said before, like charity work. Hey, I give you a piece of the pie, or I give you half a seat, or I give you a seat. Because I think it's also important to think that it's not whether a jury, I think our panel is very, is interesting in that sense, because also we have everything represented, allegedly, apart from someone with a disability. But we haven't even talked about what our expertise is, So it's not just about representation, physical representation, but then also to think, and that's why also, and maybe it would be nice if you speak about how we work, but because of course we founded this museum with now we are working with this term, so I'm using it. We are an interracial directors team, because it's not whether someone is white or black, but whether Frieda's interest is in this part, and we worked together for many years on this subject. Or this work has been with us for a long time, since we know each other actually, and then of course it's when we worked, it's okay that he also becomes a part of the museum, or he's representing it. But actually, this is the first time that he has ever sat on a panel, because usually it's very clear that me and Anta, so the black directors of the museum, represented, But I thought that for this discussion, it's interesting because his background is much more in music than mine is. So, these are the kind of debates that we then have, really on a practical level. How we represent our works, yeah.
But I think in this case you're a lot more further than other institutions and people to look what do we need for exactly this context, and not because normally we do it like that. Yeah. Let's just not think about it and keep on doing things. Yeah. I want to go back to the code of conduct you mentioned before several times, Jean-Paul. What exactly do you mean with that, and how should that code of conduct look like?
Well, we don't have enough time, but I will say that here are a few points of tension right now. You know, we are money, right? So if you're not, I mean, I can tell you, I tried to get stipendium from Berlin Senat, but every year they never give me one, right? So it's a
Did you
joke
apply
now.
this year?
No, I didn't apply this year. Good.
Because I'm in the jury.
Oh well, damn. There we go.
But I will let you know if I win it again.
Right. So I just got to bring back the old idea. Just think about it. Like if everybody in this room put together $50, you know, put together $50, and you had a plan for that money. And I'm not saying it's going to change your life. You know, part of musicians are very easily disappointed because our life is under a certain kind of stress constantly, and we constantly have a challenge to value ourselves, or some of them overvalue themselves. You know, it's this balance, this zen that we need. We need more of this. But just think, if you could create these pools of money and direct them toward something, representation of something, or decision making of 3 groups this year we're going to promote, and then next year we promote these 3 groups. Everybody, you know, these kind of things is one of the things that we need. The other thing is that the idea of getting to the youth. You know, I'm really happy to see, you know, people younger than me, so many people younger than me here. That's great. As I get older, it becomes easier and easier to be younger than me. But still, it's really great. I remember going to, for instance, Salzburg. We played the festival one year, and I noticed there was a lot of young people in the crowd. I said, what's going on there? They let the young people in for free. And you compare that with, like, say, some of the other festivals where it's this, like you say, this fetishized committee of old guys with beards talking about Eric Dolphy all day long. And it's like, that's okay, but what about the future? You know, like, you know, let them in for free. Let them see Jack DeJohnette. Let them see, you know what I mean? So that's another thing. And the last thing is, how do we develop a trust? Like, trust. So we can invest, you know, with each other. But we never talk about these things. So it's like, you know, yeah, you know, I think that's something else. And then when you were talking about a so-called white person and presenting something that's black, whatever, we have to talk about white not as some biological thing, because it really doesn't exist like that, you know. But it's whiteness. It's a state of mind. If you think like that, then you're gonna make those decisions. I know some white people. I got a cousin. You think he's white, but he you know, he thinks, you know, I won't say he thinks blacker than me, but you know. You know, yeah, it's a state of mind. It's a state of mind. And if you don't value that state of mind, or the society has told you for years, oh, that's not the state of mind to have, well, then you're going to embrace your position as whatever that construct of whiteness is. So, you know, I deal with people, you know, and people who are conscious, who are sensitive, and who have at some point in their life been an other, you know, which is very important. You can do many things with different people.
Yeah, I want to come back to the thing you said before about trust, that we need to have trust and care for each other. But I think this is really hard to establish that trust if we live with those huge differences and those huge hierarchies. And how can you build that trust then, if you are?
One thing. Listen, you know, you have this this new technology, right? That's immutable. I don't know. Somebody could make a coin and be like, this coin is represent. I'm not a technician, so I don't know. But some guy who just wants to could make a coin and said, this represents. From this coin, we are going to, you know, invest in this idea, whatever it is, an idea to make a universal record label. It's a silly idea, right? But you know, there are technologies now that can first of all automate and also render things immutable, unchangeable, so that you can trust the system, you know, and the interactions. Much more, not to just say everybody has to develop some high level of moral trust that's unrealistic, right? But the technology is here, so.
Yeah, but I think we cannot depend on technology to solve our problems.
Oh, why not? Why not? I mean, technology is a tool. I mean, you know, you got water that comes in the Leitung. I mean, that's technology. I mean, you got, you know, Lidl, he brings the food in with the airplane or whatever, you know, technology is working. You have to use technology.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, a guitar is technology. It's a technology, you know. So yes, don't see technology as something apart from solving problems. Technology does solve problems, you know. The wheel. Let's just talk, you know.
Of course. Yeah, but in the end, the humans are the ones who do these technologies, and if they have, for example, inhabited structural racism or classism, for example,
Well,
then
you need to, if you read a little bit more about the cryptocurrencies and the technology there. No, you know, you think it's funny, but the technology is there to create a way of having a trusted, a kind of trusted resource or channel or whatever you want to call it, where people can do things with it, you know. So it's there. Yeah. If you're laughing, it's probably because you're not hip to it yet.
No,
but read about it.
Read about crypto
because it's there right now. It's there right now.
Yeah. Sticking to that, I was asking myself also maybe technology is kind of a tool for something. So with the guitar we can do something, and there are also political tools maybe we can use in this discussion or in this context. And one tool could be, for example, the quote, which is also discussed. And I wanted to know your opinion about it. So what do you say? Do we need a quote or several quotes? And if yes, how should they look like?
When you guys want to take that?
Whoever wants to say something.
Well, I think quotes can be a tool to work against especially misrepresentation or the lack of representation. But I also think that it's just one step we can take to improve things, and maybe to ensure that people can get into school or to distribute the structure of schools, for example. I mean, if you go see in Berlin the schools, for example, there are a lot of differences, class differences, especially parents deciding they don't want to send their kids to the school in Wedding, for example. And I think to quote something like this would, for example, be a big chance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think so too. I mean, I think quotes are just a temporal technology or tool. They're not the end goal, I believe. They have to be evaluated constantly. But actually, now when you say it's like, if we like, can it be worse if we like to believe that we rather do nothing because quotes are not the perfect goal is actually, it's a very lazy option, I think, because that means that I think we also don't acknowledge that the status quo is not acceptable anymore. And I think if I would acknowledge that the status quo is not acceptable, then I need to implement some form of change, and I evaluate later whether it worked or didn't. And like I said, that was also our approach with the museum, to be really radical about it, and to later ask the question about, I have a nice T-shirt, maybe you like it, because it says dance first, think later. And maybe that's a good, that's like a good way to think. I think first let's implement these tools, and then let's see what they do, And I think especially in the context of universities, education, scholarships and funding, I also agree it's really important to because I think the way for some communities of color, disadvantaged communities, also in regards of financial backgrounds, it's such a long stretch. We were talking about it on the train. You know, I worked with a lot of young people some years ago who also had this dream of maybe going into music, or and it's such a hard way for them to even, we had to take them by the hand to go into university, like we went with them to universities where they could study music, and still it was so frightening for them to enter these institutions because, yeah, the structure barrier is so strong. So I really believe, again, we need to really be radical on what it then means to get these people into the institutions. And also, if I really don't know anything about jazz, but at least jazz is institutionalized in Germany in universities. And if people want to kind of make it more inclusive, I think it really means like breaking down these barriers in a very, very radical way, and maybe take people who have never, I don't know, don't know much about the field, but be trusting if they have this interest, and also be okay with the fact that they might fail, that they might go and find out that that wasn't what they wanted. And I think this is also really, really important, that a lot of these institutions are scared, of course, that people are going to fail, they're going to do as well as they should, but I think that's also part of it, Mm-hmm. We need to be like, okay, we really want to open the doors for also, refugees, as you mentioned. Then we need to embrace their failure, embrace the fact that they're not going to be the next, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think...
Who could be the next? Yeah. But what I wanted to just...
Yeah.
What did you mean by quotes? Because I'm not really sure about what you...
Quota. Sorry, my English. Quota,
okay.
Yes.
I would...
Affirmative action.
Yes. Yeah, well, quotas, it's a tricky thing, but I would say that what you need is a narrative, and that's why I expressed today when I said so-called jazz, because I don't like to call it that. Many other musicians I know don't like to call it that, because it brings you to a body of work that has been recognized, that people that we don't really, quite frankly, don't always agree with. So if you calling that jazz, you don't call me, because I'm working from a different angle. But that's why I said I was defining it as the possibility, the endless possibility of all things. Some people look at jazz, or so-called jazz music, a lot of people, a lot of institutional people, look at jazz as music that was created, like you said, somebody said earlier, the narrative from New Orleans, then Chicago, then New York, and then Buddy Bolden and Louis Armstrong, and then they look at it as that. But what it really is interacting with your environment. That's what jazz. That's how it came out. Even if you read the European, white American writers who wrote about the artists when they first heard it, they're like, this is crazy. It's like a nightingale mixed with a gorilla. What's going on here? You know what I mean? I mean, what I'm saying is that the greatest thing about that music is that it has a great capacity, far more than what's going on right now. And because the institutions have to measure everything and have to define everything, that's just what they're going to do. But the actual music itself has a far greater capacity. And, of course, immigrants or migrant communities or refugee or whoever, it can fit everyone in. But it's only fitting this amount of people in because they've made it into some kind of an intellectual thing. See, in America, the music was born out of vernacular. It was born out of community. I remember people coming with different techniques. A guy who could only play with 3 fingers, and another guy who stomped louder than he played, so it sounded like techno or some shit, But it was interesting. It was like, wow, look, they didn't learn it all in a centralized place that told you about the chord scales and told you all the right altered chords that Andrew Hill uses and Thelonious Monk. It wasn't like that, So what you have right now, you have these institutions that produce a lot of great musicians, but they kind of all sound similar, They all sound similar. So if you look at it as having a great capacity, you have room to bring in, electro, and electronica and other communities, It's just, how you feel. There's nothing wrong, It's only a question, will you develop it, Will you develop it so it becomes something, special? And then, some countries are good with that. UK, for instance, that's the entertainment and art is one of their biggest exports. They've been exporting for years, Germany is more like, Mercedes-Benz, Stuttgart, Bayern, that's like, power here. So, but you still have the same amount of talent here, and yeah.
Thinking about the institutions, I want to ask something we were just discussing before about the curriculum. As you mentioned space right now, I think of course we need the space, but we don't have the space right now. So how can we create this space? And maybe one tool, one technology could be to change the curriculum and to include other perspectives.
Yes, but the space, but you have a lot of these Rathauses and community centers and stuff, It's all a discussion, really. You go to discuss with the person who's running that space and say, hey, can I come here on Monday, whatever, and do something? It's really just ideas. If you have the idea and you've located the people who want to be interested in that idea, you don't need many people to start. You really don't, What you need is regelmäßig. You need to, consistency. Yeah. That's what you need. So, and the question becomes like, how do you validate that in your mind? Because the first thing is like, oh, that'll never work. Oh, it doesn't exist. It's all the things that you just said. That's why I was just smiling when she was talking. I was like, wow, that's great. That's great. I was too lazy. I mean, I don't say I was too lazy, but I didn't have the energy to do that because I had kind of this feeling good, But you did it, so it was beautiful.
Yeah, I think also you need the money for that, right?
You don't need the money. You need the commitment.
Okay. Okay, yeah.
You need the commitment. And the money will come at some point. But if it's not, it's like this. Commitment or, profit. Like if the commitment is here and the profit motive is there, and it's not like profit motive like greedy. Yeah, everybody has a house of Alton. You got to pay your rent. I get it. It's, of course. But nothing starts unless you have the commitment to say, I'm just going to do it. It has to be done now, If you get to a point where it's existential, you'll do it, You'll do it, But sometimes things are existential and you can't recognize them, Like we're living in a time, like we said, with the Realität, all this stuff going on, and improvisational music has so many possibilities to talk to that force, you know what I mean? But we're not involved in it, We're not involved in it, like that. So it's because we're not cohesive yet. So you have to become cohesive, and then you can make a statement towards something,
Yeah. And what would you say, from which direction would those movements maybe start?
Yeah, a lot of times they just start with the people who are in most of need, I mean, I heard a lot of need just in the last presentation, I really felt, what they were saying. I was like, wow, this, But when you get to the point where you just say, I'm just going to do this, and, and however it turns out, I'm going to still do it the next day, See, in the States, they have a history of people starting things from nothing, basically. That's because it had to be done for survival. That's why when you talk about, whiteness and blackness, within the black community, music is a lot more than just notes. it's like a way of us communicate. It's information. We're communicating, you know, and we need to communicate because we're dealing with, you know, a certain kind of force that we need to have our thing that we say. So it's much more. It's deeper than that, you know. But I hear the same needs here. I heard, you know, the same needs. So I don't want to be too broad, but
Maybe I can connect, like. No, like, because you were asking actually about curriculum, which is, I think, interesting question, because I also, this is, again, now I find it really interesting. Like I said, I have no idea about jazz. I don't know nothing about it, but I know it's an improvisational practice, and we talked about it briefly. I only know improvisation from the field that I come from, which is dance. But I think it's very interesting that we have a musical practice which comes from an improvisational space, like you said. It comes from a space of a vernacular space, which means like it comes from the everyday. No, it comes from everyday life, everyday practice. But we even teach this music. We are institutionalizing this music, but we are not able to how do you say, transfer the practice on the level of then how we teach it, how we yeah. You know, sometimes this happens. You don't have any language in your head, but how you transfer it or how you teach, how you like communicate it to the classroom. You know, you're not able anymore to be like, okay, I have to make a curriculum for this class. Let me improvise it. You know what I mean? Like really banally, to speak it in very banal. That's not happening anymore. It's not possible, no? But what would it mean, and that's what would interest me, to really adopt the strategies that you are using when you play the music for when you create institutions, schools, whatever. You know, I'm really being, again, like very fantastical here, but that's something we just very briefly, I feel like, talked about before this whole thing started, because it's like you disconnect the practice from the theory, you know, a lot of the time. I mean, that's what Germany is all about, you know, but and I think that would be an interesting point to think about, you know, what does actually, I mean, I was lucky when I studied dance. I had some teachers who really did that, but I think then we also go back to the fact of what do we do? Do we fire people? Do people lose their jobs? Because I really would be interested if white people in these power structures who have the jobs also really put their job on the line by being maybe much more radical in how they are working. What would happen then? You know, if you really like push the limit of what you are able in this position, and then you might lose your job. What does that mean at the end of that? You know, like, yeah, because it's funny that we came to speak about the Berliner Senat, because I am also now, it happens that I get sometimes asked, would you be in that jury for this and that? And I really try to, you know, break with then the parameters that are being used to choose who gets the stipendium or whatever, because I really believe it's not possible to put actually two biographies next to one another and say which is the better one. It's not possible, no? You know, I can't, it's impossible, I believe. So I really have to ask for different things. Like, okay, maybe there's a person who's really young, who's only done one work in her life, but she deserves to go to LA and to study there for 3 months. And again, maybe she will come back and never do art in her whole life. But, you know, like, yeah, I really...
But you made a great point when you said you separate the theory from practice. And that is, to me, that's very destructive. It's a very destructive thing that's developed now, that the practice and the theory are so far apart. And, of course, you can see that in academia in America very clearly, right? But the great thing about the practice of it and the improvisation of it is that you avoid some of the dysfunctional pitfalls that the structure that exists in the structure right now. Like improvisation will just say, okay, I'm going to solve the solution like this, you know, and it won't be like, oh, I was taught this, this is the right way, and that's a wrong note. And no, you just solve it a different way. You know, a great example is that when you think about hip hop and what hip hop brought to harmony, like if you listen to hip hop, now I don't mean the latest stuff where they play all these Latin chords and all this stuff, but like the hip hop of the 90s, the guys were just dealing with combinations of sounds in different keys, you know? And it worked because you would repeat it again and repeat it again. And then what we understood was that the humans can take that. That actually is cool. You know what I mean? Like some of it is very, in sense of Western harmony, atonal, but you repeat it again, you repeat it again. It's like boom. The next thing is like the 808 sounds and all this stuff. They were talking about innovations, and they used to talk, the critics used to talk about innovations as it pertained to harmony, melody, and rhythm. But with the introduction of this new technology, sound itself became innovative. Like you putting sounds out there that are now like, you know, below 40 hertz. You know, you sit next to a subwoofer, it's doing something to you. That's like, yo, you know, that's a new experience. Let's face it. Right? So, come on, tie it now. I forgot how to tie this up.
No, I just said you started with theory and practice and the separation of those
so
two things.
you get a chance to avoid the structures, and if you want to get somewhere, yes, you have to avoid it. If you think about the civil rights movement, many things that they did were against the law, right? And they were calling them radicals. But what they really were people who were trying to establish human rights. So you have to be careful with the words. You know, some people say, oh, that's a radical idea because it's not the norm. But the norm might be sick, you know? Like the norm, we just don't know. Like everybody's with their iPhone and that's kind of sick, man. You know, like sleeping with your phone and shit like that, you know? So some people are just saying things that we say are radical that are actually just trying to be human again. We're just trying to, you know, maintain our humanity.
Mm-hmm. Oh, this was a nice last sentence, actually. Thank you. Maybe one more question for the end of this, just to be more concrete. So maybe what also do you take out of this discussion? What do you have for ideas to change also the work that you're working in? Like you as a musician, you at the Stadtgarten. So what could be, like be concrete, what could be opinions, opportunities, sorry.
I think we just had the general issue, the general topic at the end of your speech again, because the question is, can you create new content? Can you create a new society in the same bottle? No, you can't. So what we do at Stadtgarten, I think we still try to go this way further, to work with diverse programmers as a team for special topics, for special musical styles and so on, and just be aware of this. I'm convinced that if you do so, and if you have the open mind, the openness, the awareness, and the will to change things or to represent everything what is there and worth to be represented, then that can happen as a mixture of bottom up and top down. Of course. It was, for example, it was and still is important that our Monika Grütters, the Bundeskultur, that she said, okay, there is a quota now in each jury, in each gremium, 50% men, 50% female. So, yeah, I think it's not the solution at all, but it's a very important step right now. So,
yeah.
Dot.
Okay, then thank you very much for this enlightening panel and the discussion. And now I wanted to open it to you. If you have some questions, I'm sure there are questions. Feel welcome to ask them.
Thank you very much for the discussion. I wanted to come back, or maybe open up a new facet which you touched upon at the beginning, because I've worked both at the union on the Berlin level, on the and on the I'm now part of Deutsche Jazz Union. So I'm just wondering, question back to you: what would the unions need to do in order to be a tool for enabling this, what you've discussed, and what have they done wrong maybe so far, or what have they not, what have they left out? Because I think there's a willingness, but sometimes a helplessness as well in what would be the correct way to approach these subjects. So I'm just posing these questions and saying I will carry that back.
Yeah, I think you need diversity, you know, because you need somebody to talk to the people. Like no union ever talked to me in Bern. I'm just learning for the first time. Great. But you just need to talk to people. You need to have people who can represent, to talk to the communities, because they know who's good in those communities. They know who's, you know, you can't know everything. So, yeah, it's just diversity, I would say. That'd be the main thing.
No, I just remembered when the union questions came back that I was just recently in Copenhagen, where a group of artists of color has also formulated themselves as the union of cultural workers of color. So, but they're actually also not a real union, but they just.
It's a real union.
Yeah, it's a real no. But this is I just wanted to mention it because we talked about it, and I think it's really interesting. I think it's a super interesting thought, and I also think it's a very I totally believe in this kind of approach to think what solidarity means and what kind of, I mean, really to think what on an actual level cultural workers of color can do together. You know, what would it mean to formulate a strike, or you know, how do we speak about contracts, money? You know, this is what I do, at least in the field that I am. You know, or whenever I have like younger people asking me, hey, how much can I take for being here or there, to speak about these things, because it's so much a policy of things that are not spoken about. You know, contracts. I think that's super important. So, and I think actually the thought of forming a union could be interesting, because this would be the space where these things are debated. You know?
Right. And you could talk to this young lady here. I mean, it's right there, you know, right there.
Yes, thank you. When you discussed about the curriculum, I was thinking that I think the question that is raised not too often is where we play our music. So I think that very often we play at the same clubs and the same venues, and we can pose political statements like we get not enough money for what we do for a living, or there's structural racism in the jazz scene, and people would clap, and then we all go home and we feel really good about ourselves, and then the next day we wake up and, you know, nothing changed. And I think I think it's more about where we play and who we confront ourselves with and the music with. Not only that we confront other people with what we probably, because it's too intellectualized, we always think that the music has to be played at, you know, a symphony is for classical music, or a jazz club where no one actually goes apart from a small bubble. But we, you know, I think that's a very important issue.
Yeah, I think that's the next step that's just waiting to happen in Germany. I mean, one of our greatest, I mean, a lot of music I listen to comes from the 60s and the 70s. Not so much in the 80s, which I was very active in, but it's because it was the first time that the music took on a political consciousness, direct political consciousness, and a spiritual consciousness, right? Before it was music to dance by, it was music to drink by, it was great music to have these big dances, and that Glinza, they never would cross, you know, but because of the 60s in America and what that all meant, the artists started crossing it, you know, and yeah, it started to affect a lot of people. So you're absolutely right, and they will never, you know, teach you that in the school. So if you look at jazz music as this higher intellectual art form, and don't include the community resource or the vernacular resource, then, you know, putting a political component in it is almost, I mean, it's almost impossible within the institutional thing. And as I said, within the context of this arrest radical, you know, it would be great. It would be great to have that, you know.
I have 2 points which I will combine together. One point was said that we don't need money to do changings. On an emotional level, I totally agree with that. On a rational level, I think everything has to do with money. So to be able to have certain changes, to be able to put a diversity in different areas, may it be locally, may it be academically, however, we need people in certain positions. And my question would be, do you think, because it was also said about we have to proactively do things like within the community, we can proactively already change things. Would you say that, what is your thought about that? I think it's quite interesting. On one hand, everybody wants to be this free, I can also hold it so you don't have to hold it. Everybody wants to be just in his art, you know, get into this super creative process. But on the other hand, when we, for example, talk about role models, politicians, changes, I think it's quite interesting. In the last 2 years, I sat in a lot, sometimes just as a person who was not even in the Verein, sometimes just as someone who wanted to see how different Vorstandssitzungen, sorry, I have to switch English, are going. And I think it's quite interesting also IG Jazz on several levels, Deutsche Jazz Union. A lot of people are in there, but in a Vorstandssitzung you have maybe 5. And then it's always the same people who do the job and nobody wants to do actually the work. Would you say that maybe this is also something that should, you know, be changed, so that this whole, I think it's a very old picture, Vereinsarbeit, nobody wants to do it, it's like a lot of work, blah, 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 blah. We have so much other things to do, and to be really able to create an environment where we can just concentrate on our music, maybe should we also think about now doing actually a little work so we are more represented also on auf Gemeindeebene, we are more represented on political Ebene? Would you say, how do you think about that actually? Shall we just remain the jazz musician who is just focused on his own grind, or shall we, when it comes to building communities or doing local changes and maybe try to create an environment where also especially young people and students are maybe more interested in this hard Vereinsarbeit stuff?
You should. I don't know if Verein is crucial, but yes, definitely, yeah. You have to, it's hard work to change something, anything. So yeah, you have to work in board of directors, or you have to, not each single person, but the person who feel the need to change something, they have to do something, definitely, yeah. Political work, or like you creating a museum, I forgot the proper name, long name. Yeah, that's necessary. I think so, yeah.
It is, and now is the time, because you've seen for the last 10 years that it just gets worse and worse, you know, so now is the time. The other thought that I had was, I forgot it anyway.
I also agree. I don't agree with what was said, that you don't need money. I agree that you do need money. Like I said, it's also why I said you have to talk about money, and also, especially positions that get ridiculous amount of money and others get like a job. You know, I think it's important. I mean, we also need money to do this work, and that's and also that's the reason why sometimes when we like now, of course, we are also very, like I said again with jazz, I cannot speak so much, but now we are approached by big institutions who want to collaborate and and then when we realize that it's just about like a representational strategy to be like, okay, now we put this on our poster and then it looks good, it looks like we've done our diversity work, but they don't offer enough money, then we also say, hey, we can't do this job because it's expensive, you know. It's like we don't do it for free, actually, like I said, and we also try to pay fair, but again, I think it's again always a matter of debating also the specific situation, you know. Sometimes it's not possible, but
Yeah, well, let me clarify. I didn't mean that you don't ever
No, I
need
know,
money.
I know what you
I
meant.
work for a living, doing playing music. So
I know
yeah.
what you.
Yeah, but I mean, if you see a need, it should never be like money gets in the
No.
way of you doing that thing. That's what I meant. But I remember my point, and my point was when you do these organizations, you have to understand it's not going to be fair. Somebody's going to do more work than the others. It's not. It's just impossible for it to be fair. So you got to know it gets nasty sometimes. You know, you have people you start with, and you love those people, and then they change. All these things happen. It's called life. That's how it is. You know. I just did something, a concert a little while ago, and some guys that I know for many years put me in a certain position, and I was just like, okay, you know, maybe just had a bad day. You know, like it's just you have to have tolerance. You know, your tolerance has to be more than saying I quit because this guy pissed me off, right? You know what I mean? Because you quitting makes the possibility of the work not possible anymore, you know? So what I do now with my groups, something happens, some weird things happen, I don't say, I quit, man. I say, let's put this thing to bed. You know what I mean? We got something special. It's gotten to a point where, you know, maybe one person is doing too much or they got burnt out or there was an argument or whatever. And let's just, we're not killing it. There's no reason to kill it. Let's put it to bed. Things change in 1 month, things change in 1 week, you know, and then everybody's ready to work again. So we have to be a little mature about these things. And don't worry about failure, man. You can't be scared about failing. I fail all the time. The greatest thing about music is that the masters fail all the time, but you don't know they failed. That's the thing. They take it and they, you know, like, all right, I missed that note, but I'm gonna do that. You know, it's not the fail, it's what you do after the fail. That's what life is about, you know. That's what success can bring you. Yeah.
Yeah. I would. I have more a comment than a question, but maybe it will spark some response from you. The one thing that I mentioned before, and that was my kind of point, is that one should use the structures that exist in a way, because they already are in the places where the power is, and you should use them to your advantage. That's kind of the point I was making. And the other is a thought I had, or a challenge for this kind of diversifying structures, because I've been reading up on historical feminism, and one problem is that it's not sufficient to just replace traditional male positions with women. It's kind of the problem of lean-in feminism, the Sheryl Sandberg problem, because then you exclude other people. It's not because, like, the thing is that you then privilege white women with good education. And there's another book called Feminism for the 99%, and they call for more intersectional feminism. And I think this is the problem, or the challenge, is that it's not done with replacing certain positions with more diverse people, but that you actually have to change the structures. And this is kind of it's really a challenge. And I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'm just saying this is part of why it's so hard. It's not done by, and this is the problem with quotas, right? You don't really. It's a way of changing it, but it's not the final step. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think in the beginning there was a bit of the question, like how you, Frieder and Joana, work together, and I wasn't sure. I think you didn't really talk about it. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I was wondering if you would care to elaborate a bit more on how you work together.
Yeah, well, it's we have different kind of settings in our way we work together. Sometimes it's just me working for Joana, and for example with the museum it was really more like it wasn't planned like it, but in the end it was like really 4 people doing all the decisions, like democratically in a way. And yeah, it was really challenging, of course. But I think it was also fruitful, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really, the museum works really collaboratively, like you said, and democratically. So there's 4 people, and when there's something to decide, it has to be voted upon or something. Sometimes it's also a bit of, okay, who has the time? Who's the, you know, it's like really also this Vereinsarbeit, because for some things we do get paid, for a lot of things we don't get paid. So it's like whoever has the time does the work. Maybe, and that's maybe also an interesting thing. Like we now represent it without knowing what the other 2 people will think about it, you know, and that happens. And also it's okay, you know, that each of us has the authority on representing the museum in this sense. Yeah, and like Frieda said, in other contexts, we really work like it's my choreography or it's my work. And then Frieda is the music producer for it. But of course, it's also always, I mean, in the theater, for example, the structures are very, very hierarchical, and we try to not reproduce these structures in the sense that I'm the big choreographer, director, boss, and everybody has to follow what I say, but it's also always a negotiation of like, hey, this is the basic idea, what are we gonna do? And it's also a matter of trust, you know, to really trust that the people you work with, they are on the same page or something like this, you know. And I think that's really a privilege of working in the free scene, of in a free structure and not in an institution. But yeah, and we are also busy with kind of asking ourselves the question: how you, as the project grows, how do we maintain this way of working? Because at the end of the day, people always want to know who the leader or who, you know, who's the responsible person and who's the boss and who makes the decisions. And it's always hard because when we work with other institutions, like, hey, we're going to take 2 weeks until we can tell you what the decision is, because that's the time when everybody can get together and talk about it. You know, like, of course, it will slow things down, these kind of processes. I think it's important to know that we can't be like, make quick shots, you know, a lot of the time.
Thank you all for the insight. I also have some comments because I'm also working as a curator, and sometimes it's difficult for me. For example, just for the last edition of the festival I did, like everything was curated, and then the boss of the whole thing said, well, we don't have any people of color with the festival. And I said, yes, but I don't want to, I mean, I have a structure, or I have an idea of, or a concept of who I want to invite. And for that time, like I said, okay, I don't know a musician who would do this and who would do this if the program's already done. I mean, I don't want to invite somebody just because of the color of the skin, but because of what I think what he or she is doing. Yeah, because of the, like, for me, it's more important to have like an idea, or that I can see the idea, the musical idea. And then sometimes I just don't, I think it's difficult also nowadays that even with the musicians, like at the Deutsche Jazz Prize, it's nice that they mention, yeah, but there's no, we want to have more diversity, but then I don't see even I only see mostly German young men, white men, or white women, and that's difficult, I think. I'm glad that it's now changing, that now here, like there's Reza or Gabri, who are here, who are young musicians with a background, with a migration background, and that's important, but it's now just coming. But it's like also the musicians, the band have the chance whom they want to invite, and sometimes then I only see white men or white women, and that's also another what I would like to change, or to have more chances for invitations.
Like, I think it's really important to know that sometimes it's okay to take strategic decisions, you know? The decision to maybe invite an artist of color into your program, even though you have to admit, hey, I don't actually know much about the music, I don't, you know, like that's what I mean. It's a strategic decision, and I think it's sometimes okay to also take the strategic decisions and to not think that, that's what I meant by like, to think that there's like this overarching universal, because that's why it's interesting that whiteness is a state of mind. So you have to be aware that your whiteness produces a state of mind that only allows you to curate certain positions because of your socialization and your social, economic, racial background. So then for someone to say, hey, I'm gonna just take a strategic decision and I'm gonna give someone a prize, I actually don't know whether they deserve the prize. I'm going to give them to them anyway, just to send a message out. I think it's a strategy that's for me totally fine, to be like, maybe as a young person of color is going to see that and be like, wow, that could be me. And if that is the only outcome or outsource of this decision, for me it worked, you know? Like, we really had this, again, I tell this many times, we had this amazing situation that we create this museum, we opened in Frankfurt, you know, and a young boy came there, 17 years old, and he came to us, he's like, one day I'm gonna be in your museum, you know? And not understanding that, of course, you know, there's no museum, but, so that's, for us, it's also, again, it's this, you know, of course, and people come and like, why is this a museum for only black artists? What about the white artists? You know, why don't you make a German museum just for entertainment? Of course, you know, we could do all of that. It's not about that. It's a strategic move to say, hey, all the other museums in Germany are busy with either their Weltkulturmuseum, like, or ethnographic museum, or their white museum, essentially, but they just don't say that they're a white museum. They, you know, they don't have to. So it's not about really talking about whether it's white people or black people in the museum. It's just about highlighting something that's missing. So I think, like I said, I want to encourage people to also sometimes just take strategic decisions, you know, which are not about quality, ideology, ja, ich vergesse all die Parameter, die man so benutzt, aber, ne, so, all these parameters that are used when you think, now I'm gonna judge a work of art, you know? I would always challenge these categories, because there are no universal categories that work for everybody, every work, every, yeah, I don't know.
And also the structural, the aesthetics of someone judging something that comes from another community is it's a flawed thing in itself. So just because you've written a lot of books and you got Herr Dr. Erdenwas and Herr Dr. who said, yeah, that's right, that doesn't mean that this thing is wrong, you know? And that's the challenge that we have in Berlin, in Germany in general, is that it's not about saying, why don't you have white women, why can't we be white? It's about creating balance. It's about creating fairness and balance. And so you're just trying to rebalance something that's in need of, and it's actually at the end, it's gonna help everyone. So if the human beings function on self-interest, it should even be self-interested. You know, you should even be self-interested because it's gonna make your society more diverse, more exciting, make you a smarter person, make you a more aware person if you're open, you know. But there's also the question about comfort. Many times people are making decisions that they're just comfortable with, and that's not it. That ain't never been it. You know what I'm saying? You got to go outside of your comfort zone, you know, to get to something, you know, special, something better.
Yeah.
Yeah, the money is real. It's real.
I have a few thoughts. I think what you just said is really important because we're so used, like for example, let's say you're a band leader and you want to put a band together, right? Who are you going to ask? A lot of people ask their peers from, like, their white friends from college. Why? Because they're comfortable. But then it's like, no, I asked them before, him or her, a lot of times him, because it's all about the music. But it really isn't. It's a comfort zone thing. It's like, they're your peers from college, right? And what I wanted to say to you, I totally understand the dilemma you were saying, but I don't think it's just not true that there aren't people of color or diverse people in the scene. It's just they're not seen. Like George Lewis calls it the myth of absence. And Jean-Paul just said, like, I know 1 million people here. So that's the structural problem we're talking about, you know? So you got to go search a little, I think. And then the last thing I wanted to say, I think your point was really good with like a strategic decision like that. One thing, just a little story that I could add to that. So one of the things I do at NYU, where I work, is I'm kind of leading the musical side of the admissions process. So I see who's applying. I've been doing this since 2014. And when I started, like, bass was always a problem. Like, we didn't have a lot of bassists applying, you know? So, and most of the bassists were male. And for the past 3-4 years, it's totally shifted. Most bassists are female now. And I actually went up to them and was like, hey, who do you listen to? And a lot of them as well, when they were young, Esperanza Spalding was their role model. It's like all of a sudden there are all these women who play bass because Esperanza became big when they were young. So I think that's proof that role models really work, I think. So I think it can be a very powerful strategic decision.
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe one more question over there.
It's also less of a question and more of a comment, because you said something about the quality also with strategic decisions sometimes shouldn't count as much. And because, I mean, we talked also yesterday and also in private talks a lot about this institutionalization of jazz and everything. And I mean, also what is quite interesting is that you have so much high standards to enter to study something, and these standards are getting higher and higher. And it was very interesting because I was also sitting in some Sitzung at the Musikhochschule, and people were saying, like, there were some professors who said, no, this year I don't take anyone, they were all bad. And I was just like, well, yeah, I mean, of course, I can understand when you have like some, I don't know, aesthetic points that you want to see in people, or I don't know. But when we still have this super high standards, I mean, they're only getting higher and higher with every year. And then we come into a field where it's not only about quality, it's a very complex thing also with people who had music class since they are 5, who had the ability to afford an instrument, who had this environment during their childhood actually to be able to practice an instrument, to have an instrument at home. I'm also teaching music, and I have kids with Corona who dropped out now because they couldn't practice at home when they live in a flat and with their, I don't know, 5-year-old brother in the room, then they couldn't practice, so they stopped playing the instrument. And this is all these kind of complex things where I totally also support the point of sometimes we have to do strategic situations, because otherwise, yeah, we're just, feeding into this bubble of Leistung, and money and Leistung, and it's not getting more diverse, actually. Yeah. I can totally understand when sometimes people have dilemmas, and also I actually, we talked about this thing with doing radical decisions. I was asked to play at a little festival in Berlin, and then I got to know the curator more, and it turned out that he actually he just asked me because he liked my personality and stuff, and he did drop a few very harsh comments also online where he positioned himself. He would never ask musicians that he don't know. And then I asked him, okay, so this is why your lineup is 90% male, or what's the reason? And he was like, yeah, I know them and they just play better than everybody else. And then I was like, okay, then we're not playing, sorry. And I don't know, that got such a big backlash, and I know there's a specific scene in Berlin now that's very gossiping about me because I made this decision. But on the other hand, I don't know, this kind of, I know a lot of people are afraid to do these steps and to say no in these kind of situations, but when we don't say no sometimes, those people also never learn. Like it's not, if they don't have negative sanctions sometimes, if you don't sit down and tell them, hey, this is shit you're doing right now, so nothing will change. So I think, yeah, and this is also people, you know, who I know, they get a lot of Förderung, who I know, they just go to some random Stipendium, Preis, bla bla bla, and they say hello, and then, ah yeah, okay, ja, du, Hans-Peter, kriegst es halt wieder. And that's halt, yeah, I hope these things change, and I know a lot of people here are maybe also sitting in the one or other jury, and yeah, I mean, it's, if you have a dilemma right now, or if anyone has a dilemma right now with the program they have right now, it is what it is. But now you know for the future, for the next time you're in a jury, next time you're in a curatorium, next time you're making a program, now you know maybe, okay, maybe we take a risk, maybe we invite this band, maybe we give him the scholarship, maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but that's okay. Yeah, as you said.
Yeah, I think this is super important because I also not believe in, I mean, there's, it's not only about then black excellence or, you know, being double, twice as good as white participants, because it's also okay to be just mediocre, because actually if we are being realistic, there's a lot of mediocre white men sitting in very high positions of power, you know? So it's okay also then to put a mediocre person of color in the same job, you know? So I think, yeah, we really need to ask where even these labels of what is excellent and what is, you know, yeah, what is the high quality, what does it even mean, you know? Because maybe the standards of rating quality in different practices or cultures, they don't exist, or they work completely differently, and we need to acknowledge that maybe we're actually not capable of judging certain things because we don't actually know how they are working, you know? Like, I think this is super important.
I have a short story about exactly what you're talking about. I'm almost afraid to say it because I know the musicians will know who they are in this, but I was doing a youth orchestra at the Bauhaus now and we were in the middle of rehearsals, and I had taken people from different types of things, right? So in the middle of the rehearsal, one of the musicians drops his instruments. I invited one singer who was playing with electronics, but she had this very, she kind of communicated a very human kind of touch. She was very frail, very, you know, maybe even unstable, I don't know. But she was clear, her expression was clear. It didn't have a whole lot of technique, you know. And I also hired some people from the music schule because I needed some foundation there. So one of the dudes who was a music schule guy at the middle of the rehearsal, third, fourth rehearsal, he drops his instrument and says, "I can't play with this shit," when she started singing. And I said, okay. I said, well, you're going to leave, huh? You're going to leave. Well, you're going to leave your partner here, too, to play without you. But I said, well, one thing you're going to see, that when we play the show, you're going to see her value. So it's a question of value. When the show came, that musician had excellent handwork. He did everything right, correct, you know. When she sang, she was bringing tears to some people's eyes. It was no technique like what he understood. So what I'm trying to say is that, and I'm sure he got that message, you know. It's a question of value. You know, we cannot impose this kind of vertical value of technique on things that have to do with human expression. You know, like Muddy Waters probably knew like 10 chords, but he changed the world with those 10 chords. You know what I mean? So, you know, if he was in the music school, they would be like, ah, look at that guy. You know, maybe. You know, if you think of those things. So music is much deeper than, like I said, the notes and being able to measure something. We don't have words to measure things that touch us. We don't have the words. So you can't teach that in normal school. So it falls outside of that, you know. But those are the things we know because we work with energy. That's what we do. We work with vibration. Music is vibration. We work with that. So we know there's not a word for that, but don't. That's it. There it is, you know. So absolutely, be confident in what you're doing, and I love it. Even it's changed. I tell you, the amount of young people here, I can tell you, it's changed from 10 years ago, right? So the change is happening.
Okay, thank you. I think we have to proceed this discussion later outside because of time reasons. Yeah, so thank you, all of you, for this discussion, and thank you all for being here, and have a nice evening.